Hello, 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 and welcome in again to another edition of the video podcast presented by WVSports.com, Musings from the Mountains. I am your leader, your host, your whatever you want to
The
call it.
recruiting guru.
Yeah, your box picture here next to my co-host. I'm Keenan Cummings, managing editor for the site, WVSports.com.
And I'm staff writer, Patrick Kotnik.
Staff writer, not quite managing editor, but he does have a
Nah,
title.
I mean you're up here. I'm like down here.
The surf on the totem pole. I guess that would make me not quite the king. That'd probably be Vernon, but I'm at least a governor.
The governor?
Yeah, governor.
There you go.
But let's talk. We got to talk about basketball. Yes, the season's canceled. Well, the tournament's canceled. Basketball's at a standstill, other than Patrick going out and shooting some hoops. I think he's probably getting some of that in. He's working some of the muscles. But we do have hoops news. Perhaps most pertinent and in the front of people's mind is Oscar Tshiebwe. He has submitted his name for an evaluation. So what does that mean? I know people see the NBA, submitting his name for an NBA evaluation, and they start freaking out. Not necessarily. Basically what this means, it's a similar thing that a lot of players have done. Javon Carter did it. A couple others have done it as well. You submit your name, you get a feedback on where you would likely be drafted. Now, there's a lot of variables there. It's not set in stone, but it's basically just something in the process to get guys an idea, better understanding, more informed opinion of where they set in the draft. The difference this year, though, and this is what makes it tricky, I wrote about this actually before Bob Huggins talked about it the other day, was what does that process mean outside of that this year? Usually, guys are either invited to the combine or able to get feedback from NBA teams to kind of get a real idea of, where they stand. What do they really need to improve on if they want to make that jump to the next level? It's incredibly valuable information. Sagaba Konate did that. He competed in the combine. There's no combine this year. There's no in-person workouts this year. There's nothing. So really, it's going to be harder than ever. Talking with some sources that are really well connected on the basketball side, it's going to be harder than ever to really get a clear understanding of where you set as a prospect. Now, you don't care about any of that, really. What do you care about? Does that mean that Oscar Tshiebwe is coming back? Does it mean he's leaving? Right now, nobody knows. But I think that the person that has the best idea outside Oscar himself is Bob Huggins. And he really expressed a lot of confidence that Oscar will be back. So I think that's all you need to know about right now where he's at in the process. Wouldn't you say, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, to start out, this is a fairly common process. Like I know I remember a couple of years ago when probably more than a couple of years ago. I'm not sure when exactly, but when Javon Carter, did the same thing. He always knew he was coming back. I know there were some people that were worried that he was going to go to the NBA, but this is a common practice by some college basketball players. And why wouldn't you do it? It allows you a chance to get some valuable feedback from the next level. Because obviously that's the goal. But as you mentioned, Keenan, with the current situation, with everything going on right now, you're not going to get that. You'll get an evaluation, but it's not going to be. They can't see you in person. You can't go to the combine. It's not going to be near as quality of an evaluation as you would get. If you were to go to the NBA combine and all that. So, like I said, Bob Huggins is very confident that Oscar will come back. But that in-person evaluation is very valuable. You get to see, are they really this height? Can they move well in person? There's a lot of aspects that you get to see. There's a lot of advantages to scouting, players in person. There's a lot of things you can see in person as opposed to film.
Yeah, and that leads us to this question. If Oscar Tshiebwe does come back, West Virginia has one open scholarship. Where does that go? Does it go anywhere? I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves, because it's pretty clear to me, just by listening to Bob Huggins, that he thinks they're in a position of strength. Right now they have 12 players, 9 coming back from last year. That's a ton. You look at some programs like Wichita State, they've lost 7 players to transfer. West Virginia's in a good spot. They lost 3 seniors. They've already replaced them with guys that signed in November. They have 1 spot to fill, Brandon Napper. Does that mean they're not going to fill it? No, it doesn't. But I think the important part here is Bob Huggins wants to find guys that fit. They've got to fit from a personality standpoint, and they've got to be able to bring something that's going to help this team. What position is that? Is that a big? Is that a point guard? I know many of you are hoping it's a point guard. I don't know. Is it anybody? Right now we don't know, but I think it will be something interesting to track. West Virginia's been linked with a few transfers. They struck out on those 3, but just to say they struck out maybe isn't fair. How hard did they really push to? Because I think Bob Huggins is taking his time with this. And you saw last year, you had Gabe Osaboyan almost out of nowhere, and he ended up being a really important glue guy for this team. So a lot left to play out, although there is one scholarship available. Recruiting I want to jump into really quickly. West Virginia's making some lists. Speaking of basketball, they're in the top 5 for Josh Gray, a big man. We'll see how that goes. I think when you think of big men, maybe not this year they necessarily need it, but the following year, maybe Oscar Tshiebwe, Derek Culver decide to go pro. Gabe Osaboyan will be graduating. So you do need a big for the future. Would that be Gray? Hard to say. But right now that they are in the mix with him, they're in the mix with some others as well. Football side, J.J. Jones, wide receiver out of South Carolina, put West Virginia in his top 10. West Virginia was his first offer. Hard to believe now. He has over 35, almost 40 offers. Really, really close relationship with Jared Parker and Neil Brown. They're in communication almost daily. He's a legacy. Not really as much talked about, but son of John Jones, running back in the 90s. So it'll be interesting to see if West Virginia can stay in that list moving forward. He ideally wants to cut it down to a top 5 and make a decision from there here in the coming weeks. So he's going to take visits, so it's going to take a while really to get to when a decision comes, but he would like to have things cut down, at least narrowed down to 5 or so schools in the coming weeks, coming months. So we'll see what happens. Who knows? It's quarantine season, guys. We're all staying in, and things change on the daily. I guess the more things stay the same, the more they change, maybe. Who knows? But, Pat, hit us with a little baseball.
Yeah, we recently got to participate in a video conference with head coach Randy Mazey via Zoom, and I'll talk about a couple things that came from that. Mazey's always been an advocate for starting the season in the summer. He's a big fan of summer baseball and all that. And although, due to the circumstances, obviously everyone's health and just the well-being of the world is obviously way more important. So that's why he's not going to push this, but. Following, when the season did get canceled, he did make he first made a mock schedule, June, starting June 1st, going through July. But then, when it was realized that, just the severity of all this, he then made another one for a couple mock schedules for a season starting in August, and he did it where, as far as the Big 12 goes, where no team plays at home the same weekend where there's a home football game. But then he also did a schedule where there would be a home series the same weekend as like a home football game where you could have the home baseball game on Friday, you have the football game on Saturday, then maybe a doubleheader that Sunday. The advantage to this, he just said, one of their biggest crowds every year for W baseball is the spring game, is the weekend of the spring game. They usually get a pretty good crowd. He said if you were to have baseball games there in the fall, that Friday, you can have a crowd just like the regional. Keenan, you remember, how electrifying that crowd was and the energy. He said you could have a crowd like that in the fall. But I just thought that was an interesting tidbit from that. Obviously, he's not going to push it, like I said, due to the current circumstances, but thought that was interesting. And just the last thing I'll mention is just roster management. He's glad that the council voted to grant another year of eligibility. He's glad that seniors have that option. But as I mentioned before in my conversation with the assistant coach, Steve Sabins, is that, it adds a whole nother element. It adds another challenge for these coaches when it comes to projecting who they're going to lose in advance. And that's a challenge already. And now it just makes it, an even bigger challenge. So definitely some questions there when it comes to roster management. One thing that was interesting from my conversation with Sabins that, as far as clarity goes, he said, he mentioned the idea of maybe seniors being exempt from the roster limit for, 4 years until everyone that was affected by this is out of the system. Because as I mentioned, they have a 35-man roster limit. That cap is off that for next year. But after that, the belief is that they're going to go back to a 35-man roster. So you're essentially fitting 5 classes in the 4 years, so there's going to be some, crunches there, some tough decisions to be made when it comes to roster management. But that's pretty much it from Randy Mazey.
Yeah, a lot of decisions to be made. This is not just seniors. Juniors are going to have decisions to make. Sophomores that would be juniors are going to have decisions to make. So it's going to trickle down. And we're not really going to know the full impact of
a lot
this
of reevaluating too will take place too when it comes to baseball recruiting as well.
But hope you had fun. I we'll be doing this again here soon. When information breaks, obviously we'll have immediate reaction type deal as well. But thanks for tuning in. We're going to start having some guests on here and Zoom guests here in the near future as well to get you guys kind of excited. Hope you're all staying safe, social distancing, all that stuff. Probably sick of hearing about it, but I feel like I have to say it. Tune in again next time. This has been another edition of Musings from the Mountains.